As a fundraiser, I used to start, like when speaking to potential donors, I used to say, hi, my name is Benny, I'm Jewish, I'm German, I'm European. That means that I talk too much Jewish. I'm not funny German. Not fun. That was the joke. And European, which means that I'm not good when it comes to managing my own resources, because that's the European trauma. I spoke to Pavel about what would be the most useful for you in this conversation, and I will basically just cover 2 points. Number one is general developments when it comes to the funding environment, something where I feel very home these days, we're used to. And then secondly, how to speak to funders or how to manage your funding. With Victoria, I had a coffee over lunch, and I told her that for many people, funding is this little figure that is in the back of your head with a little hammer, and it's constantly banging against the back of your head. And depending on how stressful things are, the hammer is getting bigger. Now, by the end of this talk, the hammer might be very big, okay? I am fundraising now, so my background was, first of all, I used to found and build NGOs, so I was fundraising for the NGOs that I worked for. I then became basically someone who was administering funds, so I administered in total 61 projects with a total budget of 8 figures in the higher rounds. And now basically I got back to a position where I never chose to be, but I'm a fundraiser again. So people call me when they have problems, when they have ideas that they want to challenge, or when they need money. And this became very apparent after the German government broke apart. And many, especially in Germany, NGOs got into the position that their funding for the next year was under scrutiny. So this is the position that I'm speaking from. Nothing that I say is in relation to any organizations that I used to work for or with. That's obviously a disclaimer that I have to put up forward. And again, if I trigger you, take it with maybe it makes you more curious. Okay, I would translate this into curiosity, not into doubting what it is you're doing. Okay, so general developments. When we speak about funders, we speak about mostly public funding that might come from regional or national institutions, even European. We speak about private donors, and private money can come from larger foundations, usually, that are private, and or high net worth individuals. The models that we also see is that some organizations are member-based. So they have small to medium-sized donations that are, built around the idea of a community, whatever community you see is. The developments that we currently see is that member-based organizations are losing track. So many of them do not know how to speak to the next generation of funders. We live in a post-structural world where people don't like to be part of clubs anymore. They like to decide individually where to put their money in the end of the year, not as it used to be that there is a constant, stream of money going to certain organizations. To make things a bit more easier, in Europe, it's very uncommon to donate part of your money because you're already paying taxes. In the US, that's actually very common. So if you get your bonus by the end of the year, your boss usually asks you, where do you put 10% of that bonus? Because you need to donate money to be part of a certain social cycle. And even there, this model is, so to say, dying, as in the fact that the newer generation tends to be interested in other topics, but more on that later. So this to membership-based organizations. I will just give you one example from the Jewish world. B'nai Brit used to be one of the most powerful Jewish organizations around there. They founded organizations such as BBYO or the ADL, many other really powerhouses today, but they themselves have a donor base that is now on average 60 plus. So it's very likely that within the next 10 to 15 years, they will have to ask very existential questions. Member-based organizations. Private foundations usually depend on high net worth individuals, which means that they, are based on people and their interest. So very often these are families that have businesses or businesses themselves that families are connected to. And it also means that we see changes depending on which generation is currently running these entities. And one development that has started around 5 years ago, that is maybe very relevant for who you are or the field that you're working in, is that a new generation is coming in, okay? The most prominent example is the Open Society Foundation. That probably many, and I will use this example very often because it's very relevant to you, but it's also very prominent. The Open Society Foundation was founded by George Soros, a very prominent billionaire, and it would give 350 million euros a year in funding to Europe alone. His son took over 2 years ago, and the Open Society Foundation has ever since decided to leave Europe, which means that as of next year, there will be 350 million euros in private donations less on the European continent. And this is simply due to the private interests of one high net worth individual. This money will go to the cause of the global south. And this will have a huge impact on Europe in itself. So it's very important to understand that with private foundations, it very much depends on the interests of the current generation running it. And the thing that I would like for you to think about is that a new generation is coming into place. So many of the societal issues that we think about relevancy when it comes to memory, these questions of relevancy have now, you will now have to answer to high net worth individuals that are part of a generation that did not grow up with the understanding that it is relevant to remember. Okay, very important to keep in mind. New causes that are now very relevant are the global south and climate change. I can think like immediately of at least 4 or 5 larger German foundations that are in the process of a generational shift. And then there's public funding. I don't have to tell you too much about this because probably most of you are receiving public funding. The problem with public funding is that you have to report to not the individual that is giving out the money, but to the people administering the fund first and foremost. So a lot more formality because they have to report to an institution. Yeah, makes a lot of sense. We give our money in taxes. People want to make sure that this money is being spent well, but at the same time, it means that you have to put a lot more work into how to write these things, these grant applications, and reporting is a big bummer. So try to get private funding, but private funding is unfortunately leaving. Now, public funding seems to be leaving as well. Again, giving the example of Germany, but we can speak about European funds as well. Demokratie Leben, which was a huge program in Germany, that was basically the lifeline of German civil society. In the last funding cycle last year, decided that they will cut the amount of donors per subject they are covering to 5, which for some causes meant that 40 organizations that were relying as a lifeline on a certain grant, out of 40 organizations, only 5 will get funding. So to make things short, what I was trying to tell you, if I think about the 3 largest private funders leaving Europe, that comes to an amount of around 700 million euros that will leave Europe in the next 2 years. The sector that I worked in, trust and safety or online regulation, completely imploded last year due to geopolitical shifts. So I'm not trying to be overly dramatic, but to look at things from the business perspective, this is exposure. It means that there will be a lot more volatility in sectors such as memory, such as yours. And that translates into NGOs dying one way or the other. Now, the ones surviving, and this is my argument, are the ones who either have a constituency, so be it a community of donors or people they serve or people that speak up for them. So constituency, highest, the biggest guarantee for you to survive as an NGO. And the second one, relevancy. And this brings me now to the second part of what I was talking about. In short, a lot of money is leaving Europe and going to other continents, be it international or national. There's less public funding available, and the people giving out the money are less interested in memory. This is what I talked about now. If you want to survive as an NGO, try to think about relevancy and speak to your donors properly. Second part, 4 minutes. The easiest way of managing so first of all, try to diversify your funding. Obviously, I'm not telling you anything new, but try to manage your funding in ways that you help the individual administering your funds. So the projects that I had the biggest success with are not the ones that were the most successful, but were the ones where we had a trust relationship, meaning I could rely on the fact that they would call me when they did a mistake. If you have a relationship that works this way, you save a lot of time because you know that you don't need to run behind them and monitor every step they're doing. in case they don't tell you what's going wrong, but they will call you when something is wrong, and then you can light your fire. I know that with donors, you always have a power dynamic. It feels unnatural to tell the person that might have a decision on whether you get funds or not, that things are not going correctly, but you make their life a lot easier. In that sense, it's very close to lobbying or to policy work or whatever. The more work you do, the easier and the more likely you are in having a better relationship to your donor. It sounds very dumb, but try to bring this to every step you're doing, okay? Try to answer questions before asking them, and show them that you did your homework. A second thing when we speak about relevancy, and this is something that will come up in another presentation, I think, I know, and try to work interdisciplinary. We had a few examples that came up. My learned friend from Austria brought them up, for example, with regard to video games. Okay, and I want to use this as an example that might be very relevant to you working in the field of memory. The idea of a video game attracting large amounts of people that are not usually interested in the field you're working in sounds like a jackpot. This is everything we all dream of it. Yeah, we all dream of a big game that makes everyone interested in the European past. Now, I have seen, at least in the last 10 years, a lot of attempts of building educational video games that cost a lot of money and no one plays them. And usually these games are perfect for conferences like these, but they will, in the long run, make donors question the relevancy of your organization because they burn a lot of money. And usually the people playing them are only the people who worked on them. Now, the kind of video games, however, that we use as examples, and they also popped up here, were Call of Duty, were Wolfenstein. So these are not games that were built by historians to attract a larger crowd, but these were games that were built by people who built games, and they consulted historians. And the kind of projects that and I mean, Victoria is probably the number one person to address in that regard, I point to you, but the one kind of, the easiest way of defining your own relevancy is to work interdisciplinary with people from other sectors. So if you want to focus on digital work, don't try to be the historian who wants to go digital, but try to go to digital folks, to techies whatsoever, and gain the interest in history. By the way, this is not only an issue of relevancy, it's also an issue of resources, because funding over there, on that side of the pond, is a lot easier to get, okay? Yeah, I'm looking at the time. The last thing that I would really like to give you on the way is try to also think of fundraising as a profession. And that's also very uncommon on the European continent, but it always makes sense to have a person that knows how to write an application to read over something that you send out, okay? Because sometimes you already lose because your document is a lot too long, yeah, or because the way it's structured. Okay, so to come to a conclusion, if I count in geopolitical developments plus the current funding environment and the fact that Europe goes through a recession, it's very unlikely that more funding will be available within the next 5 years. It's actually extremely likely that a lot less funding will be available. So either we find new sources or the sector is able to redefine its own relevancy. So you can be more efficient in fundraising by being better grantees. That's an easy way. The other one would be, find new partnerships. And I think that EMD is a good example for how that could look like. But in general, redefine your own relevancy, in the best case with the constituency. Thank you very much. All the best of luck. And if you need anything, you can reach me afterwards.